can you take me up to the Ritz? I'm headed to the FlexPath convention.
Okay.
Sweet. Let's ride. Is that Joel or head of ERISA? Need a ride?
Yeah, that would be great. I need to get to my room to get changed. John Nelson and I are going on stage tonight for ERISA, so.
What time is that so I can set an alarm?
Funny. How are the waves today?
They're all right.
Would you rate them as aggressive, moderate, or conservative? Hey, stop! I think that's John over there. Can we pick him up?
Sure, whatever.
Joel, you missed rehearsal. We're not tonight, we're right now.
Oh boy.
Drop me off real quick.
No way, Kellen, you're going with us.
Oh, God.
Welcome to ERISA Cash Cab.
Whoa.
What do you say? You guys want to play?
Yeah.
Not really. Do I have
Let's do it.
All right, let's take a ride. So a little bit of the rules. So each question, the first question will start at $100 and increase by 100 as we go. If we get to the destination, you get to keep all of your money. If you get a question wrong, that's a strike. And 3 strikes and you're out. And you'll have to walk to the ballroom.
Great.
If you get stuck, you have a crowd shout out. Let's get started.
All right.
Question number 1. If an advisor makes a recommendation for a rollover, is it fiduciary in nature?
Oh, I know this one, guys. So the question is yes, and it kind of harkens all the way back to if it meets the 5-part 1975 test. So you guys have heard us talk about this before when we were talking about the fiduciary rule. This was going to be the old one, but it's the new one again. So that's if the individual makes a recommendation based on investments on a regular basis with a mutual understanding between the parties that it's going to serve as the primary basis for action and that it's individualized to that individual's needs.
That's correct.
Yes.
Nice.
Next question. What if rollover recommendation is a one-time basis?
I know this one too. Okay, so if it's truly a one-time basis, it's not going to be considered fiduciary in nature. However, the Department of Labor has said that if it's going to be part of an ongoing relationship, like you've been the plan advisor to the plan and then you're going to recommend a rollover, or if it's the beginning of what's going to be an ongoing relationship, that it will meet that regular basis prong and it will be fiduciary in nature.
Wow, that's right.
Yes.
And next question. Can an advisor receive commissions, 12B1 fees, revenue sharing, markups, and downs?
I know this one too. So the answer to this one is it will not be a prohibited transaction as long as it passes muster under the prohibited transaction exemption 2020-02 rules.
That's correct.
Nice.
I know what I'm talking about.
All right. Our next question. What requirements are imposed by PTE 2020-02 if advisors are going to rely on the exemption?
Oh, Kellen? No?
I'll let
Okay.
you-
All right. I'll take
guesses?
this one. Okay, so there's a bunch of them, and these are now operative. So we have to be acting within this scope. You have to acknowledge fiduciary status in writing. You have to disclose services and any material conflicts of interest. You have to follow the ICS. And so you might recall that for a while now, we're supposed to have been operating under the impartial conduct standards, which essentially is encapsulated by acting prudently, acting in the best interest of the participant. So you can't put your interests above theirs. Reasonable compensation, I believe best execution under the SEC rule, and avoiding misleading statements. But I'm not done because there's more that we have to do. You have to adopt policies and procedures designed to ensure compliance with ICS and to mitigate conflicts. You have to document and disclose the reasons why a rollover recommendation is in the best interest of the investor. And then you have to conduct an annual retrospective compliance review and certification.
Wow. Nailed it. Good job.
Awesome.
Next question. Can an advisor be banned from the access to the exemption?
Yes, they can. And they can get a 10-year ban, essentially, if they've been convicted for certain crimes, if they've kind of undertaken a systematic disregard of the PTE rules, or if they're, kind of trying to job the Department of Labor with materially misleading information.
Yes. Another green light.
Anytime, guys, you can,
Can I just get dropped off now? Or?
No, you're good. We're rolling.
All right, another question worth $100. What should be considered when determining rollover recommendation is in the investor's best interest?
Okay, so again, I'm sorry. I'm jumping.
No.
Good. Okay. There's quite a few things, and we have to be doing this now as advisors if we're in the individual wealth business and we're kind of extracting rollovers. So one of the first things is, what are the alternatives to the rollover? Can they leave it in the plan? Are there other alternatives? What investments are available between the two competing options? The fees and expenses of both, whether the employer pays any of those fees, tax considerations, and the different level of services. And I think that it's that last one that we're going to have a lot of focus on. And the great news is, as a few of our folks talked about yesterday, we have the rollover analyzer that's coming out, and it's going to help you document all of these items.
That was correct. Okay, another question worth 100. When applying ICS, how does advisor get data necessary for these comparisons?
I'm just going to take this one too. So there's a lot of different ways, right? From the prospect, so if you're talking to a participant, you can ask them for the information. If you're the advisor on the plan, a lot of this is already going to be in your possession. So you can automatically feed it into the rollover analyzer. If you don't have that, you can review, obviously, publicly available 5500s. And if all else fails, which it would be an odd situation that it all else fails, the Department of Labor does say that you can use reasonable estimates, but then you have to document why you're using it and kind of the basis for those estimates.
Well done.
We are racking up the money.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah,
All right, another question worth 100. What needs to be considered in conflict mitigation processes and procedures?
Nope.
Okay.
Don't know.
So first of all, you have to protect against excessive trades, and that can include excessive allocations to illiquid or overly risky investments. It should be at both the individual and the firm level. So you have to take both of those types of conflicts of interest into consideration. The Department of Labor also wants us to avoid anything in regards to prizes, quotas, et cetera, that would incentivize the individual to act in their interest over the interest of the participant. All that said, the Department of Labor does recognize that not all risks can be completely eliminated. And that's why we talk about mitigation and not elimination.
Well done. Another $100.
I'm rolling.
What is this retrospective review?
Okay, so the retrospective review is basically a review at the end of the year of any of the recommendations that actually resulted in movement of assets. So the good news is, as part of the rollover analyzer, we're also going to have a report that comes out of the dashboard on the portal that basically populates this report for you so that you can then hand it over to a senior executive officer. That senior executive officer then has to certify that kind of all the right methodologies were followed. And so the portal is also going to help you generate that certification. So we're going to help you from A to Z on this process.
Another $100. What happens if the advisor fails to meet these conditions?
They can fix it within 90 days of knowledge of that failure.
Well done.
All right. We're rolling.
We are. All right. The stakes increase. These questions are worth $200. Okay. First question in this section. Is cryptocurrency or Bitcoin illegal in a qualified retirement plan?
Oh, guys, I know this one. So, yes, but only if it's being used in lieu of FlexPath.
No.
Oh.
Remember Jeopardy? Do you not remember Jeopardy?
Yeah, kind of.
Let's try again. Anyone have the right answer?
Yeah, it's not codified. So there's not a legal prohibition. However, the Department of Labor has pretty explicitly cautioned fiduciaries to exercise extreme care before they consider adding cryptocurrency to a 401k plan. I know that would have been right.
That's basically what I said, though.
All right, you guys can keep the $200.
All right.
Okay. What are the concerns with adding crypto to a qualified plan?
Well, obviously, the first one is the one that we just covered, that the Department of Labor, with their compliance assistance release, essentially said, hey, we're going to come hunting for you. I mean, if you're adding crypto to a plan, you're going to be kind of under the microscope as to how that kind of jibes with our CAR moving forward. But in addition to that, there's a whole slew of reasons that they named, not the least of which are, threats of fraud, theft, loss, the fact that these investments are fairly speculative and volatile in nature, custodial, valuation, and regulatory concerns. So there's a whole slew of reasons that the Department of Labor is concerned about plans adding these.
Another $200 for Joel. What is the Financial Freedom Act?
You know this?
Questions
I don't.
worth $200.
I don't.
You know what I'm going to say.
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll keep you quiet.
We should do a shout out.
Okay, let's do a shout out. Okay.
All right, who are you going to pick in the audience?
How about the gentleman in the black jacket with the incredible head of hair?
Well, under legislation introduced by Senator Tommy Tuberville, the Department of Labor would be prohibited from restricting the types of investments that workers can access through their self-directed brokerage accounts.
I think
Yeah,
he's right.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, I agree. He did
Yeah.
say FlexPath, but
Well done, crowd shout out.
All right.
$200 to the guy in the front. Is the DOL's crypto CAR considered settled law?
No. So remember, this is sub-regulatory guidance. So it's not an actual statute. It's not a regulation. And in fact, the acting assistant secretary for the EBSA, the enforcement wing of the Department of Labor, came out with the comment that they don't even view this guidance as kind of forever and ever thing. In other words, this is going to be fluid, so they're going to stay on top of it.
Great answer. $200. Okay, let's change. Our next question. Some record keepers are offering opportunities to open plans to crypto Bitcoin investing. Will this be shaky ground?
So first of all, I'd like to say, thank you to the service providers for trying to solve issues of clients. We try to do that all the time. That said, sometimes doing the right thing or what feels like the right thing can maybe get you into a little bit of hot water. So for instance, Fidelity, who is very public in assisting clients in trying to add these to their plan, received a letter from the US Senate that essentially said, all right, that's all well and good, but how are you going to kind of jibe this with the CAR? And in particular, they kind of focused on the potential conflict with Fidelity doing Bitcoin mining. So this is obviously something that we want to continue to keep abreast of. In addition, for us all, maybe a slightly smaller record keeper was really looking to differentiate themselves. And so they poured a lot of time and resources into being able to provide this to plans. And so they actually filed a lawsuit against the Department of Labor, alleging a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, essentially saying, hey, you're making law without going through the proper steps. And so it'll be interesting to see the outcome of that as well. This has happened in the past with the Department of Labor when they've sometimes kind of overstepped their bounds.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we are changing topics and we are increasing the questions to $400 each.
All right.
all right.
You guys are on a roll right
Yeah,
now.
let's hear what the topic is.
Okay. What did the Sixth Circuit rule in Smith versus Common Spirit Health?
Oh, I know everything about Common Spirit. Okay, so the Sixth Circuit upheld the district court in favor of fiduciaries, a motion to dismiss. So this is a huge victory for fiduciaries everywhere.
That's right.
Yes, I know.
Yes, I know. All right, next question. What issues did the Sixth Circuit ruling address?
Okay, this one's going to take a little bit. I know this one, guys.
Okay.
So first of all, whether it's per se imprudent to offer actively managed funds in a 401k plan. And essentially they ruled, no, that's not imprudent. They also said, whether passively managed funds are meaningful benchmarks for actively managed funds. And they said, no, that's comparing apples and oranges. And I think everybody in this room would agree that that's a little ridiculous. The extent to which circumstantial allegations of fund underperformance can support an inference that fiduciaries act imprudently. And what the court said was, while that might be one factor, it can't be the only factor that you're using to kind of get past this motion to dismiss phase. So, that's really good news. In addition to that, they basically said, no, you can't just use industry averages to show that fees were, too high, and that begets an automatic imprudence on the part of the fiduciary. So similar to what I just talked about with kind of using the disparate performance and fees, it can support that inference, but it can't be the sole reason. So it can't just be this 2020 hindsight.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
What are the key comments from the Sixth Circuit?
This is a long one.
Right.
So I'm not going to say I'm not going to read every single one that we could possibly throw up here, because really what I'd like to do is quote the entire write-up, because it's really brilliant in how it nails down what's all that's been wrong with, I think, a lot of the ERISA litigation over the years. The first thing is that in order for the court to draw a reasonable inference that the defendant is liable for alleged misconduct, there has to be some actual plausibility of a breach that's provided. In addition to that, they said, it's not enough to just show that imprudence comes down to simply pointing to a fund that has better performance. And we've seen that in a lot of the litigation. Like they're like, this fund performed better than this fund, so there must have been, something wrong with the process. That's not good enough. That's 2020 hindsight. They also said that you have to point out that time at which the investment became imprudent. So you can't just kind of throw out these numbers and then sit back and hope that the court builds your case for you. So you got to show when it becomes unsuitable for the goals of the plan. And and this is a good one, merely pointing to another investment that has performed better in a 5-year snapshot. So we're talking about target date funds in this instance. In a 5-year snapshot of the lifespan of a fund that is supposed to grow for 50 years does not suffice to plausibly, and that should say plead, an imprudent decision. Largely a process-based inquiry. In other words, what they were saying was, you have to point to the actual process, the flaw in the process, and not just some small period of underperformance, because otherwise you could basically take every investment, find that period of underperformance, and say that every fund has been imprudent at some point, which just allows for cherry picking by plaintiff's counsel. And that disappointing performance by itself does not conclusively point towards a deficient decision-making process. Such allegations, standing alone, do not move the claim from possible and conceivable to plausible and cognizable. So that's an important difference. It can't just be a possible breach. It has to be a plausible breach. And to date, a lot of the litigation has been more based on possible when it's gotten past the motion to dismiss phase.
That was right.
Fancy that.
Next question. What is the importance of the common spirit ruling?
I think I'm just going to wrap up the common spirit questions. Okay. So first of all, it makes the plaintiffs actually evidence that there's a defect in the process and that they can't just rely on 2020 hindsight based on comparing fees or comparing performance. The reason that that's important is that this all took place at the motion to dismiss phase. Plaintiff's whole goal is to get past that motion to dismiss phase, because at that point you start getting into discovery and the costs of litigation go way, way up, which is what drives settlement, which is really what plaintiff's counsel is kind of hunting for. So if we can get them to have this higher standard that they have to meet at the motion to dismiss stage, and most of them haven't pled that in their complaints, there's a greater likelihood of success for fiduciaries at the motion to dismiss stage. And what that means is that we're not going to have as many settlements, which in turn should end up driving down the amount of ERISA litigation if the other circuits are so good to adopt the standards that the Sixth Circuit has put forward.
Well done.
Very good.
You got that one.
All right.
All right.
Okay, increasing the stakes to $600.
All right, I've done the heavy lifting
All
until
right.
now.
Are you going to
John,
pass it off?
yeah, John.
See if I can get a few here.
Yeah.
Okay, first question in this section. Your client's 401k plan includes low-cost index funds, which, as we all know, are less expensive than actively managed funds. Has your client satisfied ERISA's fiduciary duty of prudence?
Okay. Let me speak up here. I'll take one here.
Okay.
So this is interesting. So we actually had a Supreme Court decision earlier this year, Hughes versus Northwestern University. It came out of the Seventh Circuit. So the Seventh Circuit basically said, yes, if you offer a suite of low-cost index funds with respect to an excessive fee claim, you've met your fiduciary duty. Appealed up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, you haven't met your duty. The Seventh Circuit looking at a few quotes here, the Seventh Circuit basically said that if you offer low-cost index funds as plan investment options, you've met your duty, even though there may be other plan options that may be imprudent. The court looked at what the plan provided versus what the plaintiffs wanted. The plaintiffs were asking for low-cost index funds. The court basically said, you've got them. The court said, you've met your duty. The court reasoned that by offering those low-cost index funds, you eliminate any claim that plan participants are forced to stomach an unappetizing menu. I like that, the menu unappetizing. If you have low-cost index funds, you've met your duty. Because the preferred type of investments participants wanted, the plaintiffs wanted, were on the lineup, the court said they can't complain about flaws in the other options. So, Supreme Court decision, this is big news in the ERISA world when a case gets to the Supreme Court, an 8-0 decision that said the lower court's reasoning was incorrect. The concept here is that ERISA requires plan fiduciaries to monitor all plan investments and remove any imprudent ones. Plan fiduciaries are required to evaluate and determine which investments may be prudently included in the plan's menu of investment options. The Supreme Court said, even in a defined contribution plan where participants choose their own investments, the plan fiduciaries are still required to conduct their own independent evaluation to determine which investments get included. If you fail to remove an imprudent investment from the plan within a reasonable time, you breach your fiduciary duty. Now, let me add, this case came up in the context of a 403B plan with 265 investment options. Those plans are still out there. I think this case should be the death knell for those types of lineups because it's impossible for a fiduciary to prudently manage all those different investment options.
Come on, I want a 48-hour FIR. That sounds like fun.
All right, $600 for John.
Okay.
That was right.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Next question, increasing the stakes to $800.
Ooh.
Your client's 401k plan names the employer as the plan administrator. Is that a problem?
Okay, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some common plan document issues here for a moment. So oftentimes when you go through the adoption agreement, it's really easy just to check that box, plan administrator equals employer. Now, maybe you've created a problem because by designating the employer as the plan administrator, you may have just caused the members of the board of directors to become fiduciaries with respect to the plan. Now, here's why that happens. If you look at California Corporations Code, and I just use the California Corporations Code as an example, that in all state corporate law, there's a similar provision that basically says the business and affairs of the corporation shall be managed and all corporate powers shall be exercised by or under the direction of the board. All right? You've also got ERISA Interpretive Bulletin 75-8 that talks about whether members of the board of directors are fiduciaries. The answer is yes, to the extent they exercise, here's the key language, or have the authority to exercise. Have the authority to exercise discretionary authority and control with respect to management of the plan. So if the business of the employer is managed by the board and all corporate powers are exercised under the direction of the board, and you've named the employer as the plan administrator, then you've arguably made each director a fiduciary with respect to the plan. Now, IB 75-8 further provides that the board may limit its liability pursuant to a procedure in the plan for designating other persons to carry out fiduciary responsibilities. So this is what we want to look at. And also 405C of ERISA talks about allocating fiduciary responsibilities to others pursuant to procedures named in the plan. So I can't, as a director, completely get rid of my responsibility, but if I delegate, I change the level of my responsibilities. So if I delegate, what are my ongoing responsibilities with respect to fiduciaries I've appointed? Simply at reasonable intervals, I need to look at what they've done and make sure that they're operating in compliance with the plan and statutory standards. And that's a lower level, I think, of fiduciary oversight. So if we want to remove the board of directors, how do we do that? Now, I want to make a distinction here, though, between what we call settler functions, where the board will be involved. Those are business decisions by the company versus fiduciary functions. So a settler decision by the company, that's not subject to ERISA fiduciary standards. That's subject to a corporate business judgment rule. So settler functions might be plan design, plan amendments, funding, contributions, things like that. What we want to shift, though, are decisions with respect to the plan that are fiduciary in nature, interpreting plan terms, hiring service providers, selecting investment options, those kinds of things. So the concept here is to delegate to a corporate officer, for example, the president. The board delegates to the president the power and authority to appoint the named fiduciary. This would be an example of a certain resolution, whereas the company wants to designate XYZ, the chief executive. The company hereby delegates the power and authority to appoint the administrator of the plan to the president, and that delegation continues until revoked by board of directors. So we've delegated.
And we'll have this as a template that's available for you with the other board resolution that we currently have, naming the committee.
So you know what? I'll leave it here. You can write it down real quick if you. Okay, so now the corporate officer then appoints the named fiduciary. So this would be a sample resolution. The president's been appointed. The president appoints the administrative committee. Then name the plan committee in the plan document. I think that's important. You know, one of the requirements of a written plan document is so that somebody can pick up the plan document and see what the terms of the plan are. So if you go through this exercise, but you don't amend the document to name the committee, I think then you still have the employer on the hook. Now, for most of our clients, the board of directors and the officers who run the day-to-day business are one and the same. If that's the case, then don't worry about this allocation. But if you're working with larger employers with independent directors, I think you need to give some consideration to who you name as the fiduciary with respect to the plan. Try to remove the directors from what I call line of sight responsibility. Okay?
That was correct. Thorough as well.
Don't worry, I'm just getting warmed up.
Okay, next question. Common plan document problems. Is it important to always ask your client, does your company have any W-2 employees who are not eligible for the plan?
Okay, that's good. For $800, I'll take this.
All right.
Now that seems like a pretty obvious question, right? Do you have any W-2 employees who aren't covered by the plan? Ask that question because you'll be surprised at the answer you might sometimes get. The key here is that you're required to administer the plan in accordance with the terms of the plan. The IRS says that if you don't do that, that's a qualification failure. The Department of Labor says you have a fiduciary duty to administer in accordance with the terms of the plan. So you got to ask that question. Now, generally the answer will be yes, sure, we have employees that we don't consider benefit eligible. It might be union employees. It could be part-time, temps. There might be other job categories, project-based employees. But the key here is that you need to check the definition of eligible employees against how the plan is being operated. Because if the company is excluding employees as a practical matter, but hasn't excluded those folks under the terms of the plan, guess what? They're eligible. Now, just as a side point, I learned this lesson the hard way years ago. I was meeting with a client, a new HR director over lunch, and she mentioned that the company had about 500 employees. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, I've been working on the plan for a while. I think it's more like 300. Where's that other 200 coming from? And she said, well, we have retail stores, but those employees aren't eligible. Okay, big problem, because they're not excluded as a class under the plan. So this is a way that you can add value to your clients by making sure you keep them out of trouble. Check the plan documents. An easy question to ask, but you'll be surprised what the answer might be.
Are you sure that's the right answer?
I think it
Are you
was.
sure?
I'm going to go with it.
That was correct.
All right.
Okay, another question worth 800. Should leased employees be excluded from eligibility under the plan?
Okay, leased employees.
Oh, guys, I actually know this one.
No.
Trust
No,
me. Trust me. I got it.
Okay.
I got this one.
All right.
Yes. The answer is no, because they could be invested in flex plan.
Oh,
Duh.
no.
An easy answer.
You're done.
Oh, no.
You're done.
2 strikes now.
We should have
Yes.
dropped them off.
Oh, man.
We are very close. You almost have to walk to the ballroom.
Well, let me take another whack at it if I can. So leased employees, a concept that's near and dear to all our hearts. Remember, a leased employee is somebody who works for your client on a substantially full-time basis, but gets a W-2 from somebody else, like a temp agency. So the idea is if they've been there for 1 year and they work substantially full-time, which in this case means 1,500 hours a year, 30 hours a week, after a year, they're considered a leased employee. So once again, just ask your client, do you have any leased employees? And if you do, I think leased employees should always be excluded. You don't want to have to deal with this idea of how do I get W-2 comp from the temp agency into my client's plan. So just exclude your leased employees. The only problem would be if leased employees are more than 30% of the workforce, you could have an issue. because the leased employees do count for coverage testing, but they don't have to be eligible for the plan. So leased employees, check the box, don't cover them. Right answer, but
That was the right answer.
no bell.
Mine sounded better though.
All right, we get the
There
bell
we
anyway.
go. Okay. Next question. Should you always ask your client, does your company exclude any items of W-2 wages from the plan?
Okay.
I think this is yes.
Duh. Of course you should answer your client that. The same idea, once
Yes.
again, same idea that we talked about with eligible employees, eligible compensation. It's another no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often employers get this wrong. And if your client gets it wrong, the correction is they have to make up contributions to the plan on that compensation they didn't count. So ask the question. Categories might include like a spot bonus, non-cash wages, excess group term life insurance. The idea, if there's something that's hitting the W-2, but the employer doesn't count it for purposes of the plan, let's make sure that we exclude it under the terms of the plan. Otherwise, those wages count as compensation. And if it's a CPA audit or a DOL or IRS audit, the employer will have to make corrective contributions on that. So just ask the question, and then if it's excluded, exclude it under the terms of the plan document.
That was correct.
Thank you. All right, good. I'm on a roll now.
You are on a roll.
Another question worth 800.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
All right. Are there certain types of wages that should always, with very limited exceptions, be excluded under the plan?
Yeah, so with very limited exceptions, because never say never or never say always, but for the most part, there are some types of compensation that I think when you're working with your client on the plan document, you should always think about excluding. One of those types of compensation is what we call pre-entry date wages. Okay, wages I earn at the company before I'm eligible for the plan. Now, let me give you an example of how that works. Let's say the plan has quarterly entry dates. Let's say that Jane starts to work on April 15th. Her comp is $5,000 per month. It's a quarterly entry date, so she enrolls on July 1st, and she elects to contribute 5% of salary, okay? Now, for ADP testing, if I measure compensation from Jane's entry date, her ADP for the 401k non-discrimination test is going to be 5%, which is what it ought to be. She's deferring $1,500 over the last 6 months of the year. Her comp for the last 6 months is 35%. But if I measure comp from her higher date, because I haven't checked the box to exclude pre-entry, now her ADP is 3.53%, 1,500 divided by 42.5. Now, why is that important? Because most of your turnover takes place among your non-highly compensated employees. And we want to try to drive a better 401k test for those folks, right? Help pass the test. So measure comp from entry date to get the higher ADP to make it easier to pass that test. Okay?
That was correct.
Oh, another one, fringe benefits. I think you should always check the box to exclude fringe benefits. If you're counting fringe benefits, you always have the argument, well, then I'm paying a bonus on bonuses, more to speak. The other thing I like about fringe benefit is fringe benefit is not a defined term under the IRS regulations. It can kind of be a catch-all for things. Let's say, for example, your client's paying holiday bonuses to people at Christmas time. And all of a sudden, somebody comes in and says, well, you should be counting that for 401k. We don't count that. Well, call it a fringe benefit. Exclude it. So always exclude fringe benefits. It kind of just gives you that catch-all for picking up these things that you might otherwise have missed. Okay?
That was correct. Even better. Okay. Does your client's 401k or 403b plan provide for discretionary matching contributions?
All right. Since I'm on a roll and I've got the clicker, I'll continue. So this is a new one, okay? Because lots of times plans do provide for discretionary match. So look at the plan document. If your plan document says the employer may make matching contributions to be determined by the employer, that's fine. But bear in mind now that under Secure Act, there's a new notice requirement. So if you have a discretionary match, you have to give a notice to the participants telling them how that's going to be allocated, whether it's a percentage of compensation or a flat dollar amount. You have to tell them what the computation period is, payroll period or plan year. And if you have different business locations, you have to designate that. That notice goes at the end of the year to participants and to the plan trustee.
Great job.
Thank you.
So we still have 2 strikes.
Give me the bell. Give me the bell.
Still have 2 strikes.
All right.
What is the top paid group election? When should your client generally make this election?
Okay, so once again, talking about plan compliance and plan administration and operation, just a few tips. So you're working on the adoption agreement, you come to the top paid group election. Now remember, this deals with highly compensated employees. Who's an HCE? Who is a non-HCE? Now the general definition for HCE is if you make more than $130,000 in 2021. Remember, it's a look-back test. So you hire a new CEO this year and you pay that person $1 million a year for 2022. She's not an HCE because you look at what the comp was in 2021. So more than 130,000. But with the top paid group election, you can add a condition. You can say more than 130,000 last year and in the top 20% of the workforce based on compensation. So ask your client, do more than 20% of your company's employees make more than $130,000 a year? Now you see this come up in professional service organizations like law firms, medical groups, high-tech firms. You look at Microsoft, just Netflix, Google, you see what the median income is for those companies. And you have a lot of people making more than $130,000 now. So if you've got that situation, you should generally make that top paid group election. Now, why? Now think about this once again in the context of the ADP test. If I've got somebody making $150,000, $160,000, $170,000, those folks typically make significant 401k contributions. So they have a big ADP, a large 401k contribution divided by their compensation. So what I want to do with the top paid group election is push those folks from the HCE group down to the non-HCE group, once again, to drive a better test result for my client, okay? So if I've got more than 20%, generally make that top paid group election.
And that's a big one, gang. I think all too often we see companies that miss out on that opportunity, and that means that their HCEs are missing out on the opportunity to save.
Yeah.
So that's a real big question to ask.
Yeah, good. Okay?
That was correct. Both of your answers. Should we do all or nothing? Final question?
Yep. All in.
Sure,
Let's do it.
push
Let's
it
do
in.
it. Let's do it.
All right. Final question worth $1,000. Are there any other companies that have W-2 employees who are participating in the plan?
Okay, so once again.
No. Yeah.
So once again, it seems like a simple question, but at your annual meeting or at some point, ask the question. Because once again, you might be surprised. We've got a medical group that has set up a foundation, and the foundation employees are in the plan. But the foundation hasn't adopted the plan. So if we have employers that have employees in the plan that aren't the named employer, just make sure they've signed a participation agreement to in fact adopt the plan and become an adopting employer. And you've met your job as an advisor. Okay?
That was correct.
All right. Going on with a bang. Okay.
Wow. You guys only had 2 strikes, so you get to collect all your money.
And we made it to the ballroom.
We made it to the ballroom.
That's fantastic.
And welcome to the 2022 RPAG National Conference.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
All right.
I want to wrap up real quickly with a couple of comments. So first of all, these are exactly the types of questions that we get on the ERISA team on a regular basis. So if you're not reaching out when your clients have an unusual question, a compliance-related question, a question regarding new law or new regulations, you're missing out on an opportunity to pick the brains of some really, really smart folks that can help you in turn around and pass on crucial information to your clients. So I'm going to plead with you, and there's multiple ways that you can do so. I think the fastest tends to be emailing. We also have the Q&A on the portal now, where we've been constantly uploading our answers to these questions, so that you can do a quick search to find these types of Q&A, and that's continuing to grow. So understand that every time that you send one in and we answer it, we're sanitizing it to take out any kind of client-specific information, and then we're putting it back out on the Q&A. As a quick takeaway too, you may have noticed that the Senate actually just came out with the EARN Act. And so there's quite a few provisions in the EARN Act that are going to be driving change in the retirement industry. We've been hearing lately that Secure 2.0 is just around the corner and potentially likely to be passed before the end of the year. That will probably require a little bit of reconciliation between the two pieces of legislation. But the good news is I think that we've got some good changes coming down the pipe for our clients. Not only is that good for the general populace and the participants that are using the plans, the employers that are administrating and sponsoring the plans, but also for us, because these are always great consulting opportunities. If you remember Secure 1.0, there was a slew of changes that a lot of which were potentially optional, but there were some that were going to become required of plan sponsors. And so these are always opportunities for you to kind of flex your knowledge in front of your client and to help them make a better designed plan moving forward. Obviously, I would recommend working in conjunction with your clients' TPAs and record keepers. They're going to have a lot of information on this. Once we get closer to reconciliation, we'll have a full-blown webinar on the resultant legislation so that you all become black belts in it. In addition, as we mentioned throughout, the rollover analyzer is really being built to help you if you want to get into wealth management, or if you're already in wealth management, comply with that prohibited transaction exemption 2020-02. It is going to be a focus of the Department of Labor when they're going out on audit, and they're going to start looking more closely at what advisors are doing with retirement plans. So this one really becomes important to make sure that you're navigating it correctly and that you're documenting it accurately. And so that's what we have built into the portal, is something that's going to be easy for you to turn around, go out to an individual participant, give them all of the different competing elements, help them to make that decision when you're potentially making a recommendation to roll over, and then basically capturing all that information if money does move in the portal on the dashboard, which will then populate that annual review that you can give to your senior executive, and then generate the actual certification. So, we're really trying hard to make sure that we have everything in place to help you from a compliance perspective and to maximize your businesses. So for the first time in the history of RPAG, the ERISA team
No, I've got a couple of comments.
Okay.
Since I'm the only one up here wearing long pants, I'd like to offer just a couple of closing comments too as well, just real quick. I want to go back to this idea on the plan document too, because as Joel mentioned, one of the things that we offer our RPAG members is the ability to send in questions to the ERISA team to be answered. But I would say probably 80%, 90%, a lot of those questions, the answer's in the plan document. The plan document sets forth the terms. So we may get a question, can a participant do this? Can the employer do that? Look at the plan document, because 9 times out of 10, the answer is actually in the plan document as to whether that can happen. So I want to emphasize that.
Yep.
And then I just want to kind of back up Joel's comment on pending legislation. I think the general consensus is probably nothing's going to happen till after the election. But between the election and the end of the year, I think there's a real good shot that we will see new legislation. And some of the things that we're looking at, like if you have 403B plan clients out there, the ability to use some of the custom CITs in those 403G plans, that'll be a huge benefit. I think that the catch-up is likely to go from $6,500 to $10,000. That'll be big. I think some of the taxation on how contributions get taxed is going to change. People have the option to elect Roth treatment on match contributions that they can't do right now. Things like that are going to change. So I think that there is significant legislation coming down the pike, so kind of keep an eye on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
And with that,
okay, so now Joel can close it.
we are actually going to give 8 minutes back to everybody for the first time in the history of the ERISA team up here. So thank you. We had some fun with you today.
Thank you.
Take care.